Good morning. It's Tuesday, November 11th, 2014. This is Tech Talk Today, episode 89. And it's only Tuesday, and I already feel like it is going to be a busy week for tech news. We have the net neutrality stuff that's developing, a lot of things with Mozilla that are developing, major iOS flaws that have come out today that we're going to hear more about throughout the week. The Tor project is investigating how they were so severely breached by the federal government recently in the crackdown of Silk Road 2.0, and the Gnome Foundation is fighting Groupon. So we're going to start digging into a lot of these topics today. To help me do that, I have assembled an excellent team of commentators on the internet. Time-appropriate greetings, Mumble Room.
Good morning. The news cycle is back.
Man, well, at least for a little while. And it's like some of the big stuff that we've sort of been waiting that has broken through, and we have some progress. But let's start from the security standpoint that affects you iOS users. And man, oh man, I don't mean to brag. I am sorry. I shouldn't do this. I should be more humble. But on last Thursday's TechSnap post show, and I know we didn't record it. We don't record that. Alan, Jude, and I 100% called this because we recognized in the roundup a flaw in the way that Apple is signing enterprise apps. The ones where if you're a large enterprise and you want to deploy your own custom apps and you don't want to have to go through the App Store, you can do this ad hoc provisioning where you sign the binary. iOS, however, is a little too trusting. And Alan and I were sussing this out based on a story. We were kind of reading between the lines and thinking, man, this could be a major problem because if iOS is so blindly trusting these enterprise signatures, almost as if they're coming from Apple themselves, you get sort of unfettered access to the system. And so FireEye, who's getting a lot of press these days for discovering a lot of things like this, they're a private security contracting firm who's making a lot of hay in the new cyber warfare paranoid atmosphere because they're actually putting out some pretty good stuff. So here's what they found back in July. So they've known about this for a little while, but because they're working with Apple, they haven't been releasing any information. They discovered that an iOS app installed using the enterprise ad hoc provisioning could replace another genuine app already installed through the App Store on an iPhone or iPad, as long as both apps use the same bundle identifier. This is something specific to iOS. This in-house app display could have an arbitrary title like New Flappy Bird that lures the user into installing it. Then that app would then replace another genuine app after installation. So there's a little manipulation that has to be done on the user's part, but if you can overcome that, all the apps can be replaced except for iOS pre-installed apps such as Mobile Safari. But otherwise, have at it, Haas. The vulnerability exists because iOS doesn't enforce matching certificates for apps with the same bundle identifier. They've verified this vulnerability exists in iOS 7.1, 1.2, 8.0, 8.1, 8.11 beta for both jailbroken and non-jailbroken devices. They're already working with Apple on a fix. They say an attacker could leverage this vulnerability both through wireless networks and USB. And if you have remote iTunes syncing management turned on and the enterprise provisioning, you're vulnerable. Now, you're not vulnerable if you have an iOS device and you've never used an enterprise management system. You've never brought it in. They've never added their enterprise signature to your iOS keychain. If that's never happened to your phone, you're not vulnerable. If it has happened to your phone and someone has a method to deploy an app through that system, you're vulnerable. So it's a pretty limited scope in practice, but it fundamentally shows, I believe, a bigger issue with Apple is that they truly do not fundamentally understand security. Like, they get it from a very, using the right types of encryption, private enclaves for fingerprint IDs that are just hashed, that the operating system never gets to see. They just get tokens, tokenized Apple payments. All that's great and fancy. But fundamentally, this is a huge oversight. What it essentially allows for is any enterprise application, any enterprise out there that does provision of their own apps, which is a lot of large enterprises, because think about all these custom iPad apps for, who cares, real estate agents, architects. I mean, I've seen hundreds of them. Anybody that has one of these devices now, when you deploy an app, it's trusted just as much as an app from Apple. And that's because of the way they designed their system. And it doesn't affect a lot of people, but I think it shows maybe a broken philosophy. What do you guys think?
It's just full of holes. It's just... Apparently somebody at Apple just does not understand that they need to secure their S, otherwise...
It's weird though, right? Because I don't think you could say iOS is insecure any more so than pretty much any other popular...
Well, right.
But it's like there's certain things where they just don't think about security in the right context.
Well, this is side loading, kind of, isn't it? They don't really care for side loading.
Right.
They don't care for this market. They just want you to use something out of their app store.
Yeah, that's true. It's definitely not an area of their focus as much. But it's a hard thing because you want to have a secure way to sign and allow apps onto a device. And then and maybe when you design the system, you only think about it from a consumer standpoint. Then you start to get enterprise traction and realize, oh, we have to cater to these enterprises. Let's just kind of give them let's give them a mini version of the same system we use. Like, you can almost see the logic in it, right?
Well, I'm thinking about all these, what do you call it? Like hospitals that are using iOS devices, and all of a sudden, bam, not HIPAA compliant anymore.
Right. See, these are areas where I think when it comes to working in the enterprise, Apple's pretty smart to team up with IBM because they haven't thought enterprise. They haven't thought in the way enterprises think for decades, like IBM and Microsoft has, right? And that's why Microsoft, when it comes to enterprise stuff, is so far ahead of Apple because they've thought about this stuff now for many years, right? And so that's where Apple is just, even though they're so huge from a market standpoint and in a user-based standpoint, they're doing pretty good, but they just haven't had to live this world for a long time. And I think we're going to start seeing as these, because they've now arrived there with the usage, but not with the years of investment to get there. Now they're gonna, where a lot of these little things are going to start popping up, and I think it's going to be a rough couple of years for iOS and Mac OS.
And this is not so little of a thing, by the way.
Right.
I mean,
it's
true. Pretty friggin' huge.
Yeah, I think it's probably only I don't think it's a huge percentage of iPhone users that do this, but it's probably a decent chunk.
Now, is this like an enterprise, Chris, from your sysadmin days? Is this like the zip drive that is shared between home and work, or is it like Dropbox put on there? I mean,
it's like
it's a security hole.
Yeah, well, I suppose. I mean, so the idea is it's supposed to allow enterprises to make some really crappy in-house app and fart it off to a few dozen iPhones or iPads, and then they don't have to bother Apple with submitting it to an app store.
Are those iPhones owned by the people, the customers themselves, or are they corporately owned only for business?
Most of the time, now it's going to depend on the business, but most of the time when it's something, that's provisioned by the company, that's when they will, attach it to an enterprise management infrastructure. I don't know. It depends on the company, because I've had clients that allow users to bring in their phone and then they sign off on an agreement saying, you'll be available and this will be your work phone, and then they attach it. I don't like it from a security standpoint. Okay. All right. Well, so this next story, this headline, it almost seems too outrageous to believe, too grand in scope, and almost too convenient because we keep always hearing it's China, it's Russia, it's China, it's Russia. But they've been sitting on this story again for a little while. We're just finding out about it yesterday. China is suspected of breaching the US Postal Service computer network. Now, don't worry if you're in the US, they didn't go after you. They're suspected, the Chinese hackers, of breaching the computer networks of the United States Postal Service, comprising the data of employees, not of users of the service. About 800,000 employees, including the Postmaster General. They got his information. The intrusion was discovered back in mid-September, according to officials, but of course they declined to comment on the record. And they wouldn't say on the record who they thought was possible, but nudge, nudge, wink, wink, they think it's Chinese. They say also that the timing of the announcement has absolutely no coincidence with the fact that President Obama is meeting with the president of China right now. I mean, that is the fact that they discovered this in September, and then the Washington Post published it the day that President Obama met with... no, that's just a coincidence. There's no politics being played there at all.
Right.
All right. Next story is kind of exciting, but I'm a little worried about Mozilla. Maybe they're going to get a target on their back after this one. Seriously, I just... it's a little... There is a lot of rhetoric right now against people that are turning on encryption by default, people that are making it easy for terrorists to use the internet for malicious purposes, and Mozilla's throwing in. But first, before we talk about that, I could use your help. Patreon.com/today. We actually lost somebody. We're down somebody, and it hurts so bad. It's probably because I said something. I do that. Probably because I said something mean about Firefox. But if you'd like to support the Jupiter Broadcasting Network, go over to patreon.com/today. You can invest in our network, and what this allows us to do is budget. It gives us a roadmap and some planning ability. which is something that we've struggled with for a long time. But also on top of that, it allows us to invest in new projects. Something we've been working on behind the scenes now for a couple of weeks, you'll find out about really soon, was made possible because of the support on our Patreon page. And if you go over to patreon.com/today, you can pledge whatever you can afford. We have a default of $3 per month. More or less is great. And we also have some suggested pledge levels towards the bottom, where you get Swag Club and stuff. In fact, Lionhead, did I hear correctly? You just got your Swag Club stickers?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Do you like them?
Oh, yes, they were actually very nice. I put one on my laptop and one on my tablet.
Nice. Yeah. I know you mentioned you sent in pictures to Ange, so I'll have to check those out. I love the vinyl stickers. This just, once you go vinyl, you'll never go back. It is the best kind of sticker. And the pledge levels, we have a few open slots still. You can get in there, and then from time to time we send out thank you stuff to those of you who are really invested in our network. And it also helps us keep the ads to a minimum in the other shows. It gives us a good balance and helps give us negotiating leverage with our advertisers, which means that we get the best advertisers for you guys, and we're not dependent on them either, which is pretty powerful when you think about it. And sort of, in a big way, is what's wrong with a lot of other commercial media. And I think this is a neat recipe where we mix the two. Patreon.com/today. Thank you, everybody, for your support. And we're going to have some updated milestones soon. Okay, so did you guys hear that Firefox is kind of thrown in behind Tor, hoping to sort of beef up its capacity? Tor is definitely under a lot of fire this week. I hope we get to the story maybe tomorrow or Thursday. But Mozilla will give the Tor project a capacity boost as part of the Firefox maker's new strategic privacy initiative called Polaris, which it unveiled on Monday as part of its 10th anniversary celebrations. The Polaris initiative will see Mozilla work alongside partners such as the Tor Project and Center for Democracy and Technology to promote online privacy, largely through the inclusion of new features in Firefox. However, on Monday, in a blog post, Mozilla said it wants to accelerate pragmatic and end-user-focused advances in privacy technology for the web, which means it needs to focus more on user-friendliness. And on Monday, they also said they'll be adding the privacy-focused DuckDuckGo search engine as a pre-installed option for Firefox users on Windows, Mac, Linux, and Android. There's also a new Firefox feature called Forget, which gives users a simple way to clear out all tracking information covering the last 5 minutes, 2 hours, or 24 hours of their browsing session, which is kind of neat. So some good stuff from Firefox, and they're going to throw in, they're going to do some, so you know in like Tor, the way it's set up is you have the midway points that help scatter the traffic. I'm probably butchering this horribly. And then you have the endpoints where the traffic actually comes out. It doesn't look like Mozilla's going to do endpoints. It looks like they're doing more of sort of the midway points and the middle relays as they are. And Mozilla believes that by adding a bunch of capacity there, it'll generally speed up the overall performance of the Tor network. So we may actually see some Tor performance increases thanks to Project Polaris from Mozilla.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Definitely decrease latency if you've got a higher volume of relays.
Yeah, I think it's really cool of Mozilla to do that. And so before we get to the Gnome thing, one more story that's just way out there. You know, Googs doesn't do anything small anymore, so when they decide to lease an airfield, they go big. They go real big. That's right. After months of negotiation under a secret holding company, Google now has bought its own airfield. Now, they use this holding company so that way they can do things sneaky and people don't know it's Google, called Planetary Ventures. And they signed a lease with NASA where they've taken over the Lafayette Federal Airfield, including 3 hangars, 2 runways, and even a golf course. The 60-year deal will cost Google $6.3 million per year in upkeep and a total of $1.16 billion in rent. What the hell is Google going to do with a NASA airfield, guys?
Launch those drones so that they can spread internet access wirelessly?
Maybe.
The hot air balloons?
You know, maybe this is a big part of their delivery service.
Rent it out to SpaceX.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, no.
I mean, I don't mean to always go to Skynet, but I mean, when you're building artificial intelligence, you're monitoring the entire population. You've got drones, self-driving cars, and now airfield Skynet.
Chris,
Probably building a base on the moon.
I know.
I'm kidding.
Well, no, hopefully I'll just be alive long enough for the awesome part of it, and I'll die off before it gets real bad. I figure,
like, why you want to be around for the war?
Yeah, no, I think we've got another good 50, 80 years before Google goes full evil and starts destroying the civilization. So I'll ride that part.
Just embrace your Google overlords.
Yeah, that's my kids' problem, not my problem. Hey, I want to cover one story that's come in a lot of submissions over the night. This story about the Gnome Foundation versus Groupon and the battle to protect the Gnome Foundation's trademark. You might have seen Groupon has launched this kind of slick-looking point-of-sales device called Gnome. They actually called the device Gnome, which is awful. Yeah, Groupon, the coupon site. Yeah, those people. So Gnome is doing a fundraiser right now. They're seeking to raise funds to help fight for their trademark. And Groupon has issued a statement this morning saying that Groupon is a strong and consistent supporter of open source. A lot of contributions from Groupon go back to open source, and that they're willing to work with the Gnome Foundation and to come up with another name if necessary. So what the hell's going on here? Because it sounds like these negotiations have been going on for weeks, guys. And Groupon's like, no, we're not going to fight. We're good. And Gnome's like, no, we're going to fight. Let's raise some money. And how do you get to the point where you're going to raise money? Like, that's not just like something that just happens. Like, they put together a website, they created an initiative, mailing lists, fundraise, all this stuff. I mean, this isn't just like, to me, this seems like more than miscommunication.
Well, any holder of a trademark is sort of liable to defend that trademark, and they have to show that they're defending it. So they've got to take it rather seriously.
Yeah, at the same time, you'd think a cease and desist would have solved a huge problem, but apparently not.
Well, and the weirdest thing is, if they're so into open source, wouldn't they have realized that this is the stupidest idea ever to name their thing Gnome?
Well, there's that. I do agree with you there. Go ahead, Webb.
Yes. So basically what Gnome's going to run into is no matter what happens, they're going to need money. Arbitration costs money. No matter just getting into a situation with someone else, even if it's over something simple, it's going to cost them. So they need money no matter what.
That's a good point.
Whether they fight them in a court, whether they sit down under the table across from each other.
Spazzy C, did you have something you wanted to toss in there?
No, Skooky's probably got it.
Okay, and
why?
Popey, any thoughts on this?
I don't know. What depresses me more is the reaction that people have, and the fact that they mobilize the troops. If you go and look at Groupon's Google Plus page, every single post has comments from warriors on the internet who are expressing themselves at Groupon for this horrible transgression of what they've done. It's ridiculous and it's childish.
All right, so boy, that is a fascinating thing, and something I noticed building last night as like the messages started coming into me on all of the different social networks asking me what I'm going to do about it. So
Chris, doesn't it seem like the free and open source community, just in general, I mean, this is my observation over the last 8 years, needs something to get angry about sometimes.
You know what? I think what we should do is pin that right there and say we're going to continue that in Linux Unplugged, because I think it is really interesting how quick we go to war. And you know what? I also, in somewhat, am souped up because I donated this morning. I donated $55. It's really all I could afford. But I was like, you know what? I'm a Gnome user. It's time maybe I contribute a little bit. And so I stepped up and gave them some money. And you also have to wonder sometimes if it's just sort of a move to raise some funds.
Yeah, that's a good...
One of the depressing things is, you're giving money to the Gnome Foundation. That money, in all likelihood, will go to lawyers. It won't actually help the software in any way, shape, or form. It won't actually make its way into anyone's desktop. All it's doing is paying lawyers to fight for the name.
I can think of one lawyer who's going to do this for free, and she used to direct the Gnome Foundation.
Yeah, perhaps. All right. Well, I don't want to go too much. I want to try to keep a lot of this discussion in Linux Unplugged. But so we covered it here. Let's think about it some more and continue the discussion in Unplugged. And specifically, we'll talk about some of the community aspects of it. And if the story develops more, we'll cover it, especially if there's any huge changes in the story, which there could be. We'll talk about it later in the week if that arises. Tech Talk Today still has 2 more days left in it. Holy smokes. Tech Talk Today, you know what it has? Endurance, right? Yeah. It sticks with you. Go to techtalktoday.reddit.com, and then you can submit a story or a discussion or feedback that you think should fit in the show. techtalktoday.reddit.com. 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 I think that counts. Also today at jupiterbroadcasting.com. That's where you send in your feedback And then join us live, jblive.tv, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And then you get to hang out. Great mumble turnout. You guys rock today. Look at all you. Handsome, too. You guys are looking good. You guys dressed up for today's episode? Sorry, Ange wasn't here.
Yeah, dressed up in my PJs.
Well, be sure you dress up just as nice tomorrow, because I think Ange is going to be here tomorrow. All right, so we're continuing our Intel week, and by popular demand, because there's Tesla coils, we're going to play. Now, I apologize, the quality is a little low, but you have to understand I'm old. And the stuff that they were advertising when I was a kid was a long time ago now. And so the quality's low. And that's how television looked to me, children. And so you'll just have to suffer somehow. But it is so worth it because there are Tesla coils in an Intel ad. This is one of the golden eras of Intel when I jumped on and I built my first Intel computer because I'd seen my friends with their 286s. And at school, we had 286s. And then the 386 in my dad's computer was so impressive. And when the 486 came out, I had to have it. And this ad, boy, does it take me back. We'll see you back here tomorrow, everybody.
Want to run all your software fast? Then look for the Intel Inside symbol on your next computer. It says you've got a real power source on the inside. Like the upgradable Intel 486 microprocessor. Power it up and run your software at light speed. Intel, the computer inside.